Hello everyone, welcome to another stream on the channel, as tomorrow's a huge one. Tomorrow will be perhaps the biggest influencing game of this whole title race. Whatever happens, it's not over, but nonetheless, it's going to be, well, it's going to mean everything. And joining me to look at this huge game, we have Sam Fonseca back from the away end, and Paolo and George, semi-regular guests, are here to talk the game. Welcome all. How are you all doing?
All good. How are you?
Yeah, all good on my end. I think the emotion will really get it will really build and sink in come tomorrow, especially after I leave work and head for London. But we'll start on the Porto end because they have their first league defeat of the season thanks to in the hands of Casapia, where I felt it was certainly an average performance overall. When I saw that defense in the lineup, I thought, I'm not sure about this, because you have Bednarek and Thiago Silva paired together, who both do not have speed on their side, and even Jakub Kivior doesn't cover for Bednarek's ace that well. Factoring also that Martin Fernandez, whilst is a good right back, isn't our strongest. And then you had Varela and Rosario, two kind of defensive options, even though Rosario is very versatile. And then I think the other midfield and strikers didn't really make it as attacking as it could have been. And then, of course, what we saw is Casapia be effective with their 2 goals. Porto, whilst a few chances came in, none really were as effective as what is the one that Pablo Rosario scored. But maybe this is what Porto needed before this game. Although from my end, I think it would have been better if it had come slightly earlier. But Paolo, how do you reflect on recent events, which doesn't have to just be this game, but also how are you feeling about Porto coming into this game?
Yeah, I think the loss on Monday was probably the worst possible time for me. You know, I know it's only loss of the season, but I think it coming before Sporting is pretty bad for us. Maybe it's the thing that kind of lights a fire under us, because we haven't been playing that well lately. Even games that we haven't been winning. We've been winning games, but not been playing that well. So hopefully it lights a fire under us. But I think it came at the worst possible time, and I think, I'm struggling I'm trying to be positive for tomorrow, when we have been good in the bigger games this season. But yeah, I'm worried. I think that loss came at the worst possible time, and I think Sporting have been really good lately. So yeah, it's quite nerve-wracking at the moment.
How are you feeling, George?
Yeah, similar, to be honest. And obviously we have to look at it from a two-sided thing, where it's like, obviously was the first league defeat of the season, so, and it was in January. So the fact that we went that long without a loss was impressive in itself. But the only thing that I'm obviously worried about, like since what my brother said as well, is that obviously what worries me is that Farioli has this exact track record from last season, where he was on top so long with Ajax. They were blitzing the league, dominating. Going to be the most easiest title win of their life, and then pretty sure was what was in the last 3 games or close to the last 3 games where they capitulated completely. I think they lost like 3 or 4 games in a row, and then PSV Eindhoven ended up winning the league just from them bottling it. So obviously, if we lose tomorrow, that's 1 point that Sporting would be behind us, and then from then anything can happen, and it's a lot less secure. So, but obviously, going to try to be a positive, mainly for the fact that it's at home and it's a classic. So hopefully the fans will be up for it. But yeah, I'm a bit trepidatious as well.
Yeah, well, that's understandable, and I thought because before this Casapia game and before Porto ended the Europa League campaign, I had concerns on the goal front, seeing as there were a few league games where Porto barely got by and like certainly didn't have enough chances, but in the Santa Clara or Vitória Guimarães game, and normally Porto should be winning against AVS by more. But I got a bit more confident once, especially the Rangers game, because the second half was very forgettable, but the first half, after a bad start, Porto responded well with showing that they can get the goals. And whilst most of the Gil Vicente game was forgettable, they ended that one quite strong. So I think coming into this, what we can established is that it's whilst Porto aren't a team that may not give you a full 90 minutes performance, but what they can do is they can give you a section where they're very good, and that's enough to get them the win. I'm not sure how that how well that will translate when coming again to Sporting CP, where we shall transition quite nicely. Sam, any other thoughts to add in regards to Porto, because you do cover the whole league on your channel, and also how are you feeling on the Sporting side of things?
Yeah, I think all three of you really hit it on the head. I think when you look back at Porto, the performances haven't been that convincing, but when you're winning games, they don't really need to be, as long as you get the 3 points at the end of the day. But I look at games like maybe Santa Clara is the biggest one that was like, I know Santa Clara away is difficult, but the way Porto won that game via not really a chance created, but via the goalkeeper making a mistake. And I look at games like Estoril, where I thought Estoril were actually maybe the better team in that game against Porto. And I think the biggest question mark for Porto was what happens when they finally lose. Because I think that was like, how are they going to respond? And I think that was the biggest question. And to be honest, it didn't look like it was ever going to happen. You were winning games, and that, like I said, that's what mattered. But the performances may not have been there. So I think the biggest question for now for Porto is, how do you respond when that loss happens?
And that's we are. Oh, yeah, suppose we have somewhat of an idea, having lost to Nottingham Forest away.
More in the league, I mean, just because of how difficult Europe can be. And
yeah, well, I think we don't have that answer yet, but I think the best we can go off of is what happens in regards to losing to Nottingham Forest, because that was the only defeat Porto had by then, which looked okay, given that Porto had a few challenging fixtures, but eventually things got close, and I don't think any of us are going to count this competition. I mean, we're all happy enough for the lower teams to have some success there, but I think, the fact that this is going to be the height of the Powers fixture, that's going to be a very good test. Sam, talk to us on Sporting CP.
I mean, I would love to feel confident for this game, but I'm sure you guys have known from maybe watching the last few games of Sporting, most of the games have been won in the last few minutes. And I don't necessarily think it's a performance issue. I think it's mainly the case of individual mistakes are costing us a lot. And I think looking at the start of the season against Sporting Braga, where Hjulmand fouled the guy in the last minute and gave away a penalty, that's 3 points lost, or 2 points lost, I suppose, because we got one. But the last 5 victories, Sporting won, all decided at or after 90th minute. In Europe as well, PSG 90th minute, Aroca 96, Athletic Bilbao 94, Nacional 96, and of course, in the Cup, AVS 117. Again, 120 minutes that was really not needed in a game where we have Porto coming up, and we have a little bit of a injury crisis coming sort of at the end of it now. We still have Debast and Ioannidis out, but I think the good thing for us, like I mentioned earlier, the performance hasn't been great per se, but we are still picking up points or winning games, and I think the European wins really spurred on the team. I think no one expected us to beat PSG or really even Athletic Club, and then going on to do that is a great shot in the arm, a great boost of confidence. But then coming off it, struggling against the Roca, struggling against Nacional. I think the biggest question for Sporting at the moment is Luis Suarez against AVS. 8 shots, 0 goals, and missing an open goal. As much as I think he is a great footballer, his finishing does lack at times. And I think when you look at someone like Samu, he only really needs 1 shot and he scores, whereas Suarez might need 3 or 4. But I think both teams really come into this quite evenly on paper. I think although Porto did drop points to Casapia, the pitch wasn't great, the weather wasn't great. And to be honest, these things happen. I don't think anyone really thought that maybe Porto were going to go unbeaten. I think a loss was going to come somewhere. I don't think any of us really expected it to be Casapia, but they've just got a new manager in Alvaro Pacheco, who I actually quite like, and the new manager bounce, things like that. But I think it's going to be really even. And I would honestly say, just because of the 120 minutes the Sporting had to endure against AVS, Porto probably are the better team. Of course, Porto are home as well. Porto will probably be the favourites going into this one.
And why? How come Sporting CP managed to not quite finish the job that in the 90 minutes against AVS? Because I did see that they were I'm pretty sure they were 2-0 up, and AVS had a penalty that they managed to get into, take it to extra time. What happened there? Again,
just individual errors costing us. I thought Hjulmand's one, I thought they both were penalties, don't get me wrong, but I just think, in that moment, I don't think Hjulmand does anything intentionally with his arm. I think he just slides and it hits the arm. It's a penalty, no doubt about it, but I just think there wasn't much he could do. And then Ioannidis gives away a penalty again. And again, just 2 individual errors. AVS didn't really have that many chances on goal, especially clear-cut ones. And then from there, I think we struggled to respond. And that was the issue until we brought on Jenny Katamo. But I think it was that game against AVS was a decent bit of rotation, but I still was not. People were trying to blame it maybe on the manager, but I think if you look at Suarez's stats that game, 8 shots, 0 goals, XG of I think 1.2, missing a wide open goal. I think we had 30 shots in total, and we only scored 2 goals, or 3 goals, should I say. So it really was a case of the performance and the tactical bit was there. But again, it's the finishing that was lacking from Pedro Gonçalves, Luis Suarez, and Trincao playing that game. Bragança all had shots on target and just couldn't get it in. And I think it was a shame that game had happened on the Thursday before we played Porto. But I mean, nothing that I can fault the manager for. I think it was just the players not being in the right frame of mind and not being clinical enough, which if that happens against Porto, we're going to be in trouble.
That's understandable. And going to your previous league match against Nacional, a game that Sporting CP probably should have won by a 2-goal margin. But what I will say about Nacional is the fact that I'm not surprised that they gave this performance, because let's not forget when they played Porto away in September, when Porto were at the height of their powers, they managed to results are only losing via a Samu penalty, albeit Pepe should have scored in the second half near the end. But that's a game that myself, Elf, Paolo, and George were at, so they can attest to that as well. So Nacional, they've been doing well against the big teams. So, but from the sporting side of things, going through that rough patch and going on to score a last-minute goal, will that in some ways help for if something similar happens tomorrow, would you say?
I think just because Porto will be playing at home, they'll have most of the possession, they'll do most of the attacking. Whereas Nacional, even when they're at home, they're very solid defensively. You might look at them in the standings and think, well, Nacional aren't that good, but their defense is really solid, and their goalkeeper, especially in big games, has been fantastic. So I think with this game, maybe sort of an outlier, that one and Aroca. But I think hopefully when we go into Porto, we are a bit more. I think we will be on the back foot for most of the game, but I think a lot of it will be sort of counter-attacking Porto and trying to find holes in their defence, because Porto's defence has arguably been their best asset, maybe not until the last few games. But I think even I look at Diogo Costa, and I think he's probably in one of the best forms of his career in terms of what he's been able to do. I think that save against Victoria Guimarães was fantastic, the save off the line. I think he was sort of let down by defending against Casapia as well. But I think it's going to be hard to get anything past the defence, depending on what you go with. Bednarek, who's been, I believe, the most player of the months this season. You've got Kirior, who's fantastic and play left back or centre back, and Thiago Silva speaks for himself. So I think it's going to be a very tough game to try and break Porto down. I think probably our best chance on the counter, but I think it just depends on if Luis Suarez has his shooting boots on or not.
And speaking of Luis Suarez, he was a player that certainly first half of the season he was doing pretty well, but there was some question marks over him. A lot of people didn't feel that he was the clinical striker that or even someone half as good as Victor Gyökeres. But recently he's improved a lot, scored more goals in a shorter period of time, including some big ones, as well as that one against Nacional, scored twice against PSG. Where do you think where and why do you think the fortunes have turned for Suarez?
I think being able to play with someone like Francisco Trincao, who I think on form is the best player in the league. I love watching Trincao play. I think he's fantastic. I think Giovanni Kendall was a big help until he got injured. Jenny Katamo is also a great facilitator. Pedro Gonzalez is now back from injury. I don't know if he's still 100%. I don't know if he'll play the full 90. But again, I think everyone knows how good Pedro Gonzalez is here. But I just think with Luis Suarez, looking at the big chances missed, he's missed 18 big chances in the league. The second is Pavlidis with 10. So that's 18 goals pretty much. I know he's not going to score every one of them, but 18 goals that have been missed for Sporting. And I think, like I mentioned, it takes maybe 4 or 5 shots for him to get a goal. And it always feels like he'll miss the easiest chances. But for example, the Nacional, the sort of back heel flick goal, that's the one he scores, even though he'll have like 2 great opportunities of a one-on-one. But I think, yeah, the wingers are helpful. And I think someone who's very underrated in creating and carrying the ball at the pitch is João Simões as well. I think he's a big help to what Sporting are doing now with Bragança back as well. That's another sort of similar player to João Simões who can help Luis Suarez. But I think it lies on just Luis Suarez. It's weird because obviously he's the top goal scorer, so you can say he's clinical, but he's also not clinical enough. I don't know if that really makes sense. But that's how I see when I just watch him. He just sometimes, I think he rushes, or sometimes you have maybe too much time, too much space that you sort of overthink it. I think that's Luis Suarez to a T, really.
And to bring the band and the brothers in, do either of you have any questions for Sam?
Yeah, to be fair, for me is I We can answer because I actually thought you'd come in here a bit more, feeling quite confident that you beat us. I know that maybe we're dramatizing a lot of being a bit over dramatic with the loss. I was quite negative, to be fair, about the loss, but I just think you guys are in such great form. Like I know you guys have only been winning in the end, like end of the games, but I thought like you come in quite confident that you beat us. But yeah, so yeah, I guess I'm just a bit more surprised that I thought you'd be super confident because I'm not feeling the confidence at all at the moment. I think it's going to be a proper tight game between both of these two. But if you had to pick out one player from Sporting, who you think is going to take control of the game, who do you think that's going to be?
That's a good question. But just to the point of what you said, being more confident, I think a lot of it comes down to if you look at Sporting in big games, and the stat was Rui Bush hasn't beaten any of the current top 5 in the league. So that is always a question mark. I don't think necessarily that was all his fault. Like I mentioned, the Braga result, getting a penalty in the 90th minute is harsh, but there's still questions to be asked about the performance of Gil Vicente, Porto earlier in the season, and then Benfica, which of course are hard to beat under Mourinho anyway. But in terms of the player to watch, I think just because he's coming back from injury, and I don't believe he's actually scored against Porto before, but Pedro Gonçalves for me, I think he is just so good, and I think we really missed him last season and then this season when he's been injured. So hopefully he's back to full fitness, and I think he is a game changer no matter who you come against. So yeah, I'd say Pedro Gonçalves.
You guys are like the anti-Braga this year because Braga basically been playing really well and winning against the top teams, or at least getting results against the top teams, and then they've failed against the small teams, and you guys are the opposite.
Yeah, exactly. I don't really know if it's like a mentality thing with the players, but I think, for example, the loss against Porto this season was a big blow. I know that was quite early in the season, but I think we probably could have performed better. The Benfica one, I'll give credit because, like I said, Benfica, I think, are always hard to beat under Mourinho,
Yeah.
but there are games like Gil Vicente where I think we really should have put it away. And then Braga, I don't blame too much, but you could argue there was some changes that should have been made earlier. But I do wonder if it's a mentality thing for the players, because I think last year, when we look at when Rui Bush came in, he came in and beat Benfica in his first game. And that was a big statement for him to do. But then since then, in terms of the league, he did struggle a bit against Porto, against Benfica. But then the other argument is he did beat Paris Saint-Germain. So it's like, which side is it? Is it a bit of both? Is it none? Or is it just a bit unlucky?
Anything from you, George? Any questions?
To be fair, I would. The only thing, for some reason I actually can't hear Sam. I could hear you, Matt, and I could hear my brother. For some reason, I actually can't. I could hear him before we enter the stream, but now that we're in the stream, for some reason I can't hear. I don't know what's going on. It's definitely
tuning me
on my
out.
end, but yeah. Also, yeah. Our last question is just that I wouldn't be able to. Yeah, wouldn't be able to hear what he says.
Some form of juju or something going on in the area of Stevenage or thereabouts.
Yeah, it's weird. You guys can hear him. You and my brother can hear him, but for some reason I can't. For some
And I can
reason,
hear George as well.
what's going on?
He's got anti-sporting on his laptop or phone. Can only hear the Portistas.
If in doubt, George can join Parlo, but up to them really. Yes. So sort of looking into this game, I think what we'll get is something kind of similar to what we saw last season, but just a higher quality. Given how close it'll be, I think we'll see a better Porto side than what we had under Anselmi, and I think Sporting CP are going to be better at what they were trying to do when it came to getting that goal in the first half and being defensively solid in the second. I think not so much the individual. I think it's not going to be too black and white in common, but I think we're going to see something similar to that. And Sam also hinted at he thinks that Porto will get more chances in this game. So I also remembered as well. Any final thoughts on Porto or Sporting CP as the clubs individually?
I will say, I think for us, I think there's a lot of things that I think the wingers to me is we've been having a lot of issues with our wingers. I think
Yes.
I generally think, you know, the three main. I'm not going to count Oscar in this because he's still 17. He's only just come in. I don't think any of the three, Pepe, Sainz, and William Gomes, are very good. I think William Gomes is the most potential because of his age. I think Sainz
And even
is,
he's suspended for this
yeah,
game.
and he's not going to play. But yeah, I think Sainz is just, or I think when you're winger, the only positive you can say is that he presses. When that's the only thing you can got to say about a player, I think it says a lot. I've been anti him kind of all season, but we I think a big issue we have is our creativity, and it comes from the fact that our wingers and also Vega not on form. So I'm a bit worried about where our creativity is going to come because we ask Samuel to. Samuel's heavily criticised, and we can all criticise him for certain things, but he's asked to do way too much, and he's basically asked to start every attacking plays. Basically starts with the ball going to Samuel, and if the wingers aren't providing for him, we are in big trouble because he can't do everything by himself. And I just don't know where our creativity is going to come. Like you hope that against a Sporting, because Sporting are gonna try to win the game. It's going to be a bit more open, so it could create some chances there. But I do think, you know, if our wingers aren't on form, which are probably going to be, it's probably going to be Pepe and Sainz. If they're not doing anything, and if we start Vega over Mata, which I think would be a mistake, if we start Vega over Mata and we got those three players who not offering anything creatively, we might be in big trouble. I think that's the worry. Where, like Sam mentioned, that goal against Santa Clara, and it's not where it came from a mistake from the goalie. A lot of our goals this season have actually been from mistakes from defenders. It's not just that goal. There was a goal against Tondela, a goal against Estoril in the game that they dominated us. We've been relying a lot on players making mistakes against us, and it's because we just can't create for ourselves. So I think tomorrow is going to be a big thing. How do we line up attacking wise, and can we actually be creative?
I'd be interested to know your thoughts on Mora, because I would say last season that he was not only your best player, but I'd say probably top three players in the league in terms of output. And then going from, you know, I know he was linked away to Saudi in the summer, but going from one of the best players in the league to not really coming on, but not really starting in a team that I think does miss, like you said, creativity, especially because of how Borja Sainz and William Gomes have been playing. But what do you guys think on Farioli's decision to not play?
I think I'm a lot more positive on it than I was in the beginning of the season. In the beginning of the season, I mean, me and my brother and spoke about this a lot, and he knows how I feel about this. Where Mora, I was actually stressful that Mora wasn't playing much, but I think he has slowly been getting more minutes, and he does rotate a lot more with Mora and Vega. But Mora is our most creative player, our best technical player. And even in games, he's not perfect. There's been games where he started this season and he's just not played well enough, and then it kind of, you know, adds to Farioli maybe not playing him the next game. But you feel that even in games that he doesn't play well, he can just have a moment of genius, and we don't. None of the other guys have that. Vega had like a 3-4 game patch where he was getting goals or assists and he was being creative, and after that, it's not really been happening. And I think with Mora, he needs to. I think he needs to be playing these games, and if he should, I would start him every game. Because even if he's not playing well, he can bring you something, and that I think is our biggest. That's where we like the most. I think he is quality, and I think he's. I still think he's our best creative player.
Is there an argument to have him out in the wide areas?
To be honest, yes, if it wasn't for the way that Farioli plays his wingers. So no, because Farioli wants his wingers, like, I guess he maybe that because he likes his wingers that come inside and cut inside. So maybe it does, maybe it could be something that we do. Look, I won't see anything over having Borja Sainz at the left. I'd play my brother on the left if it means Sainz is not there, because I just can't keep watching him do nothing for 90 minutes. So yeah, I think but I just feel like if he hasn't tried it so far this season, he's not going to try it.
Yeah, George, any other thoughts on the teams and the game, or how it's going to match up?
Yeah. But I'll basically just kind of echo a lot of what my brother said. Like, obviously, I think we should definitely play Marta just to give us that creativity. And obviously, when he does start, he mainly, the majority of the time, does have an impact. And obviously, yeah, I will agree with my brother on signs as well. I'll be honest, that he's been poor. I've tried to defend him for I've tried to be positive on him for most season, but I am starting to realize that if he's not cutting in and trying to shoot from outside the box, he doesn't really offer much. And so I would actually, every time Oscar, our £11 million signing that came in January window. Every time he comes off the bench, the 2 or 3 games he's actually looked pretty good. And obviously, he won us that penalty versus Vidaria that won us the game. And he actually offers something that all of our wingers don't. Like Pepe is not really a dribbling kind of play. He's not really good on 1v1 situations. William, he's more of a running behind, using his pace, but he's not really kind of player to dribble. So Oshkar, he does offer us a different dimension in terms of dribbling. So I would start him, even though he's quite young. He's only 17. I will still start him. But yeah, it's gonna be a really difficult game. Obviously with Sporting as well. Obviously I was watching them. Obviously, versus PSG, and obviously watched some of their games, like a couple of their games this season, and they are really high pressing side. They really. One thing I was really impressed about Sporting is that they really attack and they really go for it. And I think they're going to come to the goal, and I think they're going to try to press us. They're going to try to attack. They're going to try to go for it. And they've got so many players, Jenny Catan with his pacing behind, and Luis Suarez and Rincon and Pedro Gonçalves. So many creative players that can hurt us. So, I'm trying to be positive. I'm trying to be optimistic, but it's going to be really difficult, and we really have to play the correct 11 tomorrow, and we can't afford to make any mistakes.
It's worth noting as well the 2 players that scored in the win away in Lisbon, both unavailable. Frankie de Jong is out for the season, and William Gomez is suspended, having needlessly made a high boot challenge. We do have a comment in: strongest Portuguese team in UEFA versus the strongest Portuguese team in Liga NOS. That's probably true. Especially on the Europe perspective. I'm sure we'll find out which is the strongest domestic team tomorrow. Sam, how do you expect this game's going to pan out and look with the teams in mind?
I think it will probably be quite an ugly game. I think there's not going to be a lot of, attacking chances. I think both teams are going to try and wait maybe for each other to make a mistake. I think Porto being at home definitely gives them the advantage. And I think having that behind you, having the Porto fans behind you, and sort of how Farioli has set up the team, and Villas-Boas has sort of set the team up where it's sort of the mentality of us against everything, which is a good mentality to have, especially when you're going for a title charge. I think it is going to be difficult for both teams. I don't imagine it'll be high scoring. I was actually just doing some research for a video I was making and going back to the Porto game in 2022 where Pepe got sent off. I think Bruno Tabata threw a guy to the floor. Mateus Reis fought with a ball boy. And a lot of these games against Porto always end up in some controversy, whether it's red cards, fights. And I do actually think it's just 2 sets of players who probably just don't like each other. But I think now with Porto sort of having a new look team, pretty much a whole new defense, still some players in there that recognize that spirit. I still think it's going to be quite a feisty game. I'd imagine probably a red card here and there. Yeah. And I think it's going to be, I to be honest, I think it will probably end up in a draw, which is good news for Benfica and probably not good news for either of us. I don't think either of us at this point want to draw. I think Benfica would love a draw right now, but I think it is going to be a very ugly game.
Yeah, well, that's certainly given us some perspective on how things could pan out. I'm not sure why I didn't display this earlier, but current situation, Still, as mentioned earlier, 4 points difference at the top. Paolo, how do you see this game shaping out?
I think I'm inclined to agree with Sam. I think it's a draw is what's most likely. I also see it be a feisty game. I think if Vegas starts, he is probably getting sent off. I believe he's walking yellow card, so I can see him getting involved in that kind of action. But yeah, I think I agree. I think it's going to be a tough game. A part of me trying to be positive with the fact that we have played well against the in the classics this season, apart from drawing the league to Benfica. I think we've been pretty good. So I believe it'll be a feisty game. But I think, I think it's probably, I can just sense a 1-1 draw. But yeah, which to be honest, with what Sam said about Benfica, I'm not worried about Benfica. To be honest, I think they're gonna finish undefeated with and still be 15 points behind. So they're like, which I would love to see, because it's such things funny to see how many draws they're getting. But yeah, I think it's I think a 1-1 is what I'm thinking.
Yeah, although I think Sporting CP can win at the Luz
They can, but I
later
think
on.
it'd be really funny to finish third and undefeated. I just, as much as I want to beat them, like I want to beat Benfica 5-0 every game, but I think them finishing undefeated and being third is the funniest possible outcome.
Yeah, I think the football community will certainly get together for the memes on that one. Any other thoughts before we talk about the lineups?
No thoughts.
Just one thing, just
Go
because
for
it's only happened recently, that I mentioned Mateus Reis fighting with Ball Boys. Apparently, this is his last game before going to Russia, so this will be his final appearance. I don't know if he'll start. I assume not. Probably come off the bench, but we know he sort of lives for the big moments and these games. Wherever I can imagine, it's a case where it was like with Pepe, for example. You love watching him play if he's on your team. Against you, not so much. So I'd imagine you guys probably aren't the biggest fans of Mateus Reis, but
not a fan. I do remember that ball. That game. I remember because that's last season we won the league. That game was kind of what I think. After that game, we believe we will win the league. Even though it was around the same time. I think it was around the same time of the year actually. But yeah, I remember that where they basically headbutted, like, and pushed the ball boy. I think if he comes on, he'll get booed. And I didn't even know he was going to Russia. Actually, that's interesting.
No, it's been something that's sort of been in the works. It wasn't confirmed, but apparently over the sort of last few hours or so that he said this will be his last game. So it would be a good way to go out if he can somehow, do a job and we end up winning. But yeah, just something to add, because I know he sort of lives for the big games. Maybe not in a good way, stamping on Belotti's head last year as well. Probably didn't paint him in the best light as well. He's definitely an acquired taste, but yeah, it's definitely something I think to look out for coming off the bench.
And with the Russian connections in mind, a bear mentality.
Very true.
I did think of one last question before we went to the lineups, and that's does this feel like a win or bust game from the perspective of sporting fans?
I think it's really interesting because I think you could obviously say these are the two favourites for the title. I mean, like you said, Benfica are still technically mathematically in it, but I wouldn't put them near the top, definitely. In terms of this being a must-win game, though, I think Sporting really do have some tough fixtures after this. So obviously Porto on Monday, then we play for Millicao in the league at home, Moreirense away, Estoril at home, Braga away. Those are 4 or 5 really tough games there that can easily be drop points. I think beating Porto on Monday will definitely give us more confidence to win those games, but those games are not easy in the slightest. And I know Porto have some tough games coming up. We've both still got Benfica to play. So I think, yeah. So I think definitely this puts one of the clubs in the driving seat, but I don't think it's a win or a bust. I think both teams will probably drop more points from here to May.
So if this ended in a draw, then there wouldn't be. I think within the sporting community, there wouldn't be too many complaints if that was to be the case.
I think it depends on how the game goes. If it's the case that we're doing well and it's again like another individual error or like a last minute goal that we concede, I think maybe there'll be questions asked. But I think looking at it in black and white, Porto are at home, going to the Dragao. I don't think we've won there since 2016, which is 10 years ago now under George Jesus. So I think no one is really expecting us to go in and dominate. So I think a lot of people are a bit pessimistic like myself, but I think just because we've seen how well this team can perform in big games in Europe this season, that there is no reason why we couldn't carry that form onto here.
Porto seem more pragmatic looking at the goal difference. Yeah, that has been the case in January and December. And Sporting have to fight in the Champions League, whilst Porto will probably have a less strong challenge in the Europa League. Sporting potentially going out a bit early and Porto going deep in the Europa League could come into play. Any thoughts on that?
Yeah, I mean, Sporting are lucky that we've got the bye into the next round, so it's just 2 less fixtures to play. But
Porto do as well.
Yes, exactly. So March and February though is going to be tough because March will be tough because we play each other again in the Taça de Portugal over 2 legs as well. So that's another 2 big games there. And the Champions League, depending on who we get, we could potentially get Benfica in the next round of the Champions League if results go to hand. So yeah, I think it's definitely a good point, but I think it depends what Porto will go for, because I'd imagine they try and fight in both competitions. But still a long season, injuries happen. There's still international breaks in between there, so we don't know what could happen in between now and then, especially with the injury point, because Sporting have had so many already. I think Porto haven't had as many as Sporting, but still a few players be out here and there. So yeah, I think it is still a very long season. That's why I don't really hold my hopes on this being a sort of win or bust.
And you mentioned in March the 2 competitions. In between playing Sporting in CP in the TASA and in the Europa and playing in the Europa League, also have Benfica away. So that's a huge set of games for Porto to start in March.
Yeah, so even our next game after this next week, we go away to Nacional and going to, obviously, Sam will know, and any Portuguese football fan will know, going away to the islands is always, even if the team is not necessarily doing well, you always look at that as the tough outing.
Especially at this time of year as well, with the storms happening in Portugal and things like that, and the weather just being not great in general. So
yeah, obviously Porto, against Santa Clara, we just about won. Sporting have had 2 controversial games against Santa Clara this season, and it's just tough. These games, literally, there was a couple seasons when we had no teams from the island, and I think everyone was quite happy about that. So it's a tough one.
So let's predict the lineups now. Start with you, George. What do you think Farioli? What team do you think Farioli will pick?
Yeah, it's a good question. To be honest, I do think I could see it being obviously your question goal. I could see it being Martin again at right back, and then with this one it's tough because obviously Jack Silva's been starting a lot, and he could do the whole Bednarek, Kivio, and then Moda left back, because Moda did play left back against Casapia, but he could also, I don't know, I could also see him doing again like Jack Silva, then Bednarek, and then Moda again. But obviously I would like to see Kivio. So I do hope he just go. I personally do hope he plays Kivio, Bednarek, and just having those be the centre backs and have Moda left back. But yeah, I think midfield would be. I do have a thing. It'll probably be similar again. I do think it'll be Varela, Rosario, and Vega. Sorry, completely forgot Froholt. Yeah, I do think it could. I probably do think it'll probably be Varela, Froholt, and Vega. But I could also see. But then obviously, it all just depends on what mindset it goes. So that's the thing with sometimes with Porto lineups. It's kind of difficult to predict the starting 11, especially when it comes to the midfield, because obviously sometimes he goes by Vega and then he puts Moda in, and sometimes he drops Moda and he puts Vega. So it's difficult. But I do hope for creativity purposes, he goes by Varela, Froholt, and Mata, because I just do think Mata starting tomorrow will give us that creativity that we don't have in the midfield. And it's funny, we talked about the goals, and I do think a big reason for the difference in the goals that Sporting have and Porto have is because they have Trincão, and they got Big Gonçalves, and there were so many creative outlets, Giovanni Kenda, but we, apart from Mata, don't have much. A Vega can be quite creative, but we just lack that. So, and then I think in terms of wingers, I think it will be Pepe Signs and Samu. But I do hope that he starts Oscar Pizzeschi, because I think he will give us a different dimension on the wing.
Paolo, you're on mute.
Sorry, I can see it being the same team as baseball. George said I think it'll be obviously Diogo Costa. I think it is going to be Martin instead of Alberto Costa. I think he's been favouring Martin instead of Costa, which is a bit of a shame. But yeah, Martin, and I think he is going to go Kivior. Sorry, Bednarek Kivior. I think he's dropped Silva. I think it'll be Francisco Moura, and then the midfield. I think it's change I have for George. I think it's Pablo Rosario over Varela, and then it will be Froholt. And it most likely will be Vega, and then it will be Pepe, Sainz, and Samuel. But I think the two choices he's kind of made clear lately is he prefers Martin over Costa, and I think he does prefer Pablo Rosario over Varela, which I'm happy with that.
Sam, what do you think the lineup from Sporting CP will be?
I think it's an interesting one because we've had a little injury crisis. Maybe not injury crisis, but a few players have gone off injured. So I imagine the goalkeeper will still be Rui Silva. The centre backs is something that is strange to me because Ignacio came off against Athletic Club with an injury, but then played 120 minutes against AVS. So I imagine he's fine. So I'd imagine it would be Ignacio Diamonde. I'd say Maxi on the left. I was saying to Matt when we filmed the sort of combined predictions that I think he's the most underrated player that we have, and maybe one of the most underrated players in the league. I think it's easy just to say that Maxi is just a guy who is sort of a passion merchant who loves just getting into these little scraps, but he's so much more. He's very creative, solid defensively, and I'd imagine it'd be Fresneda at right back. And how Paolo talks about Borja Sainz is how I feel about Fresneda. I think he's just okay, and there's nothing wrong with being an all right footballer, but I just don't think he's anything special, and I think he could struggle in against the Porto wingers. But then in the midfield, I think we will probably go Hjulmand and Morita. I think like I said, I think we're going to sit back a bit and soak up the pressure, and then I think Simões off the bench is probably the best play here against tired legs to bring him on. And then the wingers, I think Trincão and Pedro Gonçalves. I think Bragança is sort of the number 10 behind Suarez, and then Suarez up top. I think there's some question marks, maybe if, like I said, if it's Simões or if it's Morita. But I think as well, Eduardo Quaresma against Porto is something that I think he lives for those games. We talked about Mateus Reis earlier, but Quaresma, when he played 2 years ago and he was one of the best players on the pitch, I think he's someone I think he's very good on the big occasions. But yeah, I think that will pretty much be spot on, I'd imagine.
Yeah, I won't, given that there are 4 of us, I won't run through my whole prediction, but I've pretty much got most of the same as what George said, especially with the midfield and the front three. Defense-wise, I'm confident of Kivior starting. I'd actually put Alberto Costa right back in my predicted 11, and then what I wasn't sure about is which 2 start out of Bednarek, Silva, and Moura. And I just about went Silva and Moura, albeit I could, and also imagine Farioli wanting both Silva and Bednarek and having Kivior on the left. But yeah, for the most part, my predicted 11 is more aligned with what George has compared to Paolo. But on to the predictions now. Let's start with you, Paolo, and you've definitely hinted at yours, but what's your prediction for the game?
Yeah, I'm feeling like it's going to be a 1-1 type game. But yeah, I think that is what at the moment what I'm seeing. If you asked me this last Monday, I would have said we were going to lose. But yeah, I would say 1-1 at the moment.
George?
Yeah, I'll be honest. Some Porto fans might not like this. Obviously, my heart says 2-1, but given Sporting's run of form, and given the way we've been playing lately, given Sporting's win against PSG, and I'll be honest, not even the PSG, I would actually say their win over Bilbao, even more so than PSG.
Yeah, they did win that game.
Given that Bilbao was a super, super tough place to go to Cauldron, they have so many fans, passionate, and they went in there and won. So I'm not gonna lie, I've got a feeling it's gonna be Sporting 1-0. I just, they've shown that character away from home. So, but obviously my heart says 2-1, but my brain says 1-0 Sporting.
Yes, Sam, last for the reverse fixture preview, despite the any potential negative signs Sporting CP had going into this game, you still remained optimistic and refused to back down against your boys. What are you thinking?
Pretty much the same. I do think it will be a very tough game, and I think my head says draw, but I'll always go with my heart. I think we will. I think steal a win. I think it's going to be ugly. The way we've been winning games is late on, 90th minute. So I can imagine maybe Jenny Katamo stealing the game in the last minute. It's a shame we got rid of Allison because he was the one who was coming off the bench and doing a lot of the dirty work in the last few minutes. But yeah, I think my heart says 1-0, so I'll stick with that.
For me, I'm also going for a 1-1, which I think was the same aim as what I predicted for the reverse fixture. I think this time around, Sporting CP will take the lead, probably score in the first half, and have some moments afterwards, but also doing enough to and having more of the chances, and therefore finding a goal within that, even if it does take from a header from a corner. But I think we're going to see two fairly even, maybe Sporting slightly better matchups, and I'm going to say it will end in a 1-1. Maybe Ednarek scores a header, or Samu finds a goal from a good pass, or some very good goal from one of the midfielders outside the box. So yeah, my prediction is 1-1. Any other thoughts from you guys?
Are we predicting red cards, yellow cards? Because
that's a good idea.
I think there'll be a red card. I think a lot of Port's games lately have been at least one sending off from one of the teams, so I could see it being like that. But as you said, Sam, I don't know if what we had a few years ago. I don't know if with Port's team changing quite a lot. I don't know if we have any of them kind of guys that would be usually up for these games. I think Vega is someone that is like that. But one thing I predict someone on the bench to get a yellow, either a player or manager. It's crazy how and this happens in Portuguese football. It's actually crazy, like players on the bench getting yellows. So and that happened. It happened again in the last game when we played against Trevor. Samuel got a yellow on the bench for celebrating Luke De Jong's goal. So I'm predicting. That's what I predict. Someone on the bench to get a yellow card.
Yeah, I think from the Porto end, the most likely would be either the wingers, Pepe and Sainz, or Diogo Costa. Certainly don't think Bednarek would. He's got the emotion to go that far, but and probably Matthias Nunez on your end. Any other thoughts from you, George, in regards to it? You can comment on red cards, or you can comment on anything else relating to this matchup.
Yeah. I'll just echo that. Yeah, Defo is probably going to be a red card, and probably a fight somewhere. Probably after the game. Every time Porto and Sporting play, there's always like a brawl after the game. So I think someone's definitely going to fight. Probably be Bednarek and who's the hothead from Sporting. I don't know. Hjulmand
maybe. Hjulmand is quite hot-headed, yeah.
Yeah, so it's probably gonna have to happen. So like, yeah. So, but yeah, overall, I think it's gonna be a really tight game. I don't know. Yeah, but yeah, going back on what I was saying, I just do think there's something in me that does feel that there's Sporting are going to win. I think just they're so good on the counter attack and they're so good pressing, and I think they have so many fast players, especially with our slow defense. I just have a feeling they're we're going to find it very difficult, and they're going to come in, they're going to sneak a 1-0.
Yeah, before we start promoting the guests, any final thoughts from you, Sam?
No, just thank you for inviting me. It's been good to speak, even though I've sort of been outnumbered here. But no, it's been a pleasure, and I genuinely wish you the best of luck. May the best team win. Hopefully, it's a entertaining game, which I'm sure it will be. But yeah, just good luck, but not too much luck, because I still want to win.
And where can the viewers and those watching on the replay find you?
So I've got my personal YouTube channel, which is the name you can see, which is Sam Fonseca, or I've got a sporting podcast, which we usually film on Wednesdays after the game, and that's just All Things Alvalade. All Things Alvalade is very good for sporting fans from all over the world, from America, Canada, UK, and we've had lots of guests on, so make sure you check that out as well.
Sure will. I think I better tune into the podcast and anything you might have on either on your or YouTube on my way to London tomorrow. Paolo, remind the people where they can find your TikTok and anything else you may want to share.
No, on TikTok is Paul Talk Sport, and then on Twitter I'm not Paul Talks. But yeah, TikTok I'll be doing Port content and also just Portuguese league content in general as well. Just did a video about Riwav and multi-club ownership. So I want to focus a lot more on Portuguese league as a whole. But yeah, Paul Talk Sport.
George, anything from your end?
Yeah, so you can follow me on Twitter, so at Dad95, all in one word. And obviously, yeah, sometimes talk, don't tweet often, but yeah, sometimes tweet about Port and Everton. And obviously, I got a TikTok channel. It's not Port related, which is silly, but yeah, it's Everton. George Talks Everton. You can find me there. But obviously, my brother's got the Porto TikTok, so we're balancing duties.
Yeah, thanks for sharing. Great to have you all on, and great to have your contributions to TNS and those who've been watching on the replays. Very much appreciated. All interaction definitely helps the chat, and all. I'll certainly be doing a some sort of reflection of the game afterwards. We'll see how many super box I have, but yeah, I hope you enjoy the stream and look out for new content. And this will probably be my last live stream of until next month, albeit unless I decide to do a live stream for the Nacional game, then I'll be off, and we'll have the and you guys have the Andrade brothers, and hopefully Rui from FC Porto Podcast in English monitoring the channel whilst I'm away, and I should be back in. If I have to, I'll come back for or previewing the Sporting CP game. But if not, I'll be there for the Benfica preview. Yes. Once again, and likes and comments will definitely boost the channel. Remember to subscribe. Remember to follow all these guys and their work. And until next time, Forza Porto.